Have you ever found yourself falling for someone you could never have? Imagine living in a small American town where everyone knows your name and your secrets. Tonight, I'm going to share a story that challenges everything we think we know about love, faith, and the power of temptation. Meet Jasmine, a woman who thought she had her life figured out, until a new priest arrived in her local church. What began as innocent admiration soon grew into a connection that neither of them could ignore. But in a place where every whisper can destroy reputations and dreams, crossing the line between devotion and desire is more dangerous than you think. This is not just a story about forbidden love. It's about what happens when you risk everything for a feeling that refuses to be silenced. Before we dive in, I want to know, where are you watching from? Drop your city, state, or country in the comments below. And as you listen, ask yourself, how far would you go for love? Would you sacrifice your reputation, your faith, or even your future? Let's begin this journey together. The new arrival in the heart of Willow Creek, a town so small you could blink and miss it. Sunday mornings were a sacred ritual. Families lined the pews of St. Mary's Church, hats in hand, voices low, eyes attentive. For Jasmine, it was both a comfort and a cage. She'd grown up here, where everyone's history was common knowledge and secrets were currency. In a place like Willow Creek, anything out of the ordinary sent ripples through the calm surface of daily life. On one such Sunday, the air was thick with the scent of fresh flowers. Jasmine's mother had insisted she come early, as always, to help arrange the altar. Jasmine didn't mind. There was a peace in the routine, the hush of the empty church, the gentle clink of vases, the sunbeams slanting through stained glass, painting colors on the stone floor. But that morning, she sensed something was different, like a shift in the weather you feel before the first drop of rain. People gathered in small clusters outside, whispering, glancing at the front steps. When Jasmine walked inside, she saw him, a man in crisp clerical black, his eyes kind yet unreadable, his hair just a shade too long for tradition. He moved with a calm confidence, greeting parishioners as if he'd always belonged. "Who's that?" Jasmine whispered to her mother. "That's Father Daniel," her mother replied in a tone that mixed curiosity and something Jasmine couldn't quite place. "The new priest. Young, isn't he?" Jasmine nodded, trying not to stare. Father Daniel had an air about him, something magnetic that drew attention without effort. He smiled at everyone, listened intently, and seemed genuinely interested in each conversation. The congregation, so used to routine and familiarity, watched him as if he might do something miraculous simply by standing there. As Mass began, Father Daniel took the pulpit with the ease of someone twice his age. He spoke not just to the crowd, but to each person individually, or so it felt. His homily was gentle, yet charged with an energy that made people sit up a little straighter. He spoke of new beginnings and forgiveness, of finding courage when change comes to your door. Jasmine found herself captivated. She wasn't sure if it was his words, or the way he seemed to see straight through the walls people built around themselves. For a moment, she forgot about the gossip and the expectations. She just listened. After Mass, Father Daniel mingled outside, laughing with the children, shaking hands with the elderly, accepting invitations to supper as if he were gathering stories for some invisible journal. Jasmine kept her distance, but she watched, curious, cautious. The rest of the day, the town buzzed with talk. In the diner, at the grocery store, even at the gas station, people shared their impressions. "He's not what I expected," said Mr. Avery, the baker. "Young, but sharp. Seems like he actually listens," Mrs. Cooper mused, her voice softer than usual. Jasmine heard it all, but what stuck with her most was a feeling she couldn't shake, a sense that something in Willow Creek had shifted, like the first gust of wind before a summer storm. That evening, as she sat by her window, Jasmine replayed the day in her mind. She wondered about Father Daniel, where he came from, what stories he carried, and why he seemed so different from the priests before him. There was an energy in him that unsettled her, a feeling that he understood more than he let on. For the first time in a long while, Jasmine felt anticipation, a flicker of excitement that made her restless. She didn't know what it meant, or what might come next. All she knew was that nothing in Willow Creek would be quite the same again. She glanced at the church steeple, visible over the rooftops, bathed in moonlight. Somewhere inside, Father Daniel was probably unpacking, preparing for the week ahead, already becoming a part of the town's quiet rhythm. Yet Jasmine sensed, deep down, that his arrival would be anything but ordinary. Little did she know, this new beginning was the first step into a story that would test the boundaries of love, faith, and sacrifice. And as she closed her eyes, she couldn't help but wonder if, just maybe, the change she'd always feared was exactly what her heart had been waiting for. The first connection. The week after Father Daniel's arrival, Willow Creek buzzed with anticipation. St. Mary's Church was hosting its annual Fall Festival, a tradition that brought together every family for games, music, and tables crowded with homemade pies. It was the one time of year when the church grounds truly came alive, laughter echoing beneath strings of golden lights and the crisp air tinged with cinnamon and apples. Jasmine had always loved the festival. As a child, she'd raced her friends around the pumpkin patch and helped her grandmother ladle soup for the elderly. Now, as an adult, she volunteered at the bake sale, arranging cupcakes and chatting with the regulars. But this year, something felt different. There was a restless energy among the crowd, curiosity, excitement, and speculation about the new priest. Father Daniel was everywhere. He moved easily through the festival, sleeves rolled up, helping set up tables and carrying boxes with the high school volunteers. He had a quick laugh and a way of making people feel seen. When he complimented Mrs. Harper's pies, she blushed like a girl. When the kids asked him to judge the pumpkin carving contest, he joined in with gusto. Jasmine watched from a distance, her heart beating a little faster each time their eyes met. She told herself it was just curiosity. Everyone was curious. But when he smiled at her, there was a warmth that lingered. Late in the afternoon, clouds gathered, threatening rain. Jasmine was carrying a heavy tray of pastries to the refreshment tent when her foot caught on a loose stone. The tray teetered, and in that split second, she braced herself for disaster. A steady hand caught the edge of the tray, steadying it before a single cupcake fell. Jasmine looked up, straight into Father Daniel's eyes. "Careful," he said, his tone gentle but teasing. "We can't let tragedy strike the bake sale, can we?" Jasmine laughed, the sound surprising even herself. "That would be unforgivable," she replied, regaining her balance. For a moment they stood close, the world narrowing to just the two of them. The noise of the festival faded. Even the threat of rain seemed distant. "Thank you," Jasmine said, her voice softer now. "My pleasure," Father Daniel replied, still holding the tray steady. "Are you always this determined, or just when pastries are involved?" She grinned, feeling strangely light. Maybe both. He studied her for a moment, something thoughtful flickering in his expression. "You grew up here, didn't you?" "All my life," Jasmine said, nodding. "Sometimes I think I know every stone in this town, but lately things feel different." He nodded, as if he understood exactly what she meant. Change can be unsettling, but it's also a chance for something new. She hesitated, surprised by the way he seemed to read her thoughts. "Is that why you came here? For something new?" Father Daniel glanced away, looking toward the church steeple. "Sometimes we don't choose where we're sent, but I believe every place has a purpose. Even if we don't see it right away." Jasmine felt the conversation teeter on the edge of something deeper, something unspoken. Before she could reply, a loud clap of thunder echoed, and the first drops of rain began to fall. Without thinking, Father Daniel grabbed the tray with one hand and offered Jasmine his other arm. "Come on," he said, "let's get these to safety." They dashed together under the tent, laughing as the rain poured down, soaking their hair and clothes. Inside, the air was filled with the scents of sugar and coffee, the sound of people cheering as the storm hammered the canvas overhead. Jasmine was breathless, her heart pounding, not just from the run, but from the electric spark that passed between them. They set the tray down, both catching their breath, laughter lingering in their eyes. For a few seconds, they stood in companionable silence, the world outside hidden by a veil of rain. "Thank you," Jasmine said again, her cheeks flushed. Father Daniel smiled, a little more quietly this time. "You're welcome. I'm glad I could help." As the rain slowed and the festival resumed, Jasmine felt changed, like she'd stepped across an invisible line. She knew, logically, that nothing improper had happened, but something had shifted. There was a connection now, subtle but unmistakable, a current between them that neither could ignore. Later, as she walked home beneath clearing skies, Jasmine replayed the moment in her mind. She remembered the steadiness of his hand, the way he listened, the quicksilver flash of understanding in his eyes. She wondered if he felt it too, the pull, the possibility, the danger. For the first time, she allowed herself to admit it. She was drawn to him, and deep down, she sensed that this was only the beginning. Whispers in the pew. By the next Sunday, the mood in Willow Creek had subtly shifted. People still filled the pews at St. Mary's, still exchanged polite smiles and nods, but a new undercurrent hummed beneath the surface, one of curiosity and speculation. The fall festival had given everyone plenty to talk about, and much of the talk circled around two names, Jasmine and Father Daniel. It started with simple observations. Jasmine had been seen at church more often, staying late after services, arriving early to help with preparations, her laughter mingling with Father Daniel's as they set up chairs or cleaned the sacristy. To most, these moments seemed innocent enough. After all, Jasmine had always been devoted to the church, but to others, especially those with idle time and sharp eyes, the sight of her and the young priest together was a new and fascinating development. In the small town, it didn't take much for whispers to take root. At the diner after Mass, Mrs. Hendricks leaned in close to her friend, lowering her voice. "Have you noticed how often Jasmine's been here lately? Always finding something to do, always around Father Daniel." Her friend Mrs. Taylor pursed her lips. "She's a sweet girl, but it's not right to get so attached. People will talk." And so, people did. Whispers followed Jasmine as she walked through the grocery store, lingered at the post office, and echoed in the school parking lot, where parents gathered to pick up their children. At first, the rumors were vague, just questions really. But in Willow Creek, questions had a way of turning into judgments. Even in the church itself, gossip found fertile ground. During Sunday service, as Father Daniel spoke about forgiveness and compassion, eyes darted across the sanctuary, watching Jasmine as she listened intently from her usual seat. In the back rows, quiet conversations flickered like candle flames. Did you see how she smiled at him? They were cleaning the vestry together after dark. She's always been so helpful, but now it's every day. Jasmine could feel the attention, a prickling on the back of her neck. At first, she tried to ignore it. She told herself that people always talked, that she was imagining things. But as the days went by, the silence became more pointed. Conversations paused when she entered a room. Old friends hesitated before inviting her to join them at lunch. Even her mother seemed uneasy, asking gentle questions about how much time Jasmine was spending at the church. One evening, as Jasmine finished tidying the sanctuary, she found Father Daniel alone in the front pew, staring up at the altar. The golden light of sunset streamed through the stained glass, painting his face in soft colors. He looked up as she approached, offering a weary smile. "It's beautiful at this time of day, isn't it?" "It is," Jasmine agreed, her voice quiet. She hesitated, then sat beside him, careful to leave a respectful distance between them. For a moment, they sat in silence, the weight of the rumors unspoken but heavy in the air. "Are you all right?" Father Daniel asked, his voice gentle. She glanced at him, seeing a flicker of concern in his eyes. "I'm fine. It's just, people are starting to talk." He nodded slowly, running a hand through his hair. "I've noticed. I hoped it was just curiosity, but this is a small town. Jasmine tried to laugh it off. They'll find something new to talk about soon. But Father Daniel shook his head. Gossip is like a fire. Once it starts, it's hard to put out. They shared a long, uneasy silence, both aware of the lines they couldn't cross and the lines others were already drawing for them. When Jasmine left the church that evening, she felt the eyes of Willow Creek following her all the way home. She wanted to be angry, but mostly she just felt sad. Sad that a simple kindness, a friendship built on respect and trust, could be twisted into something else by those who needed a story to tell. As the week went on, the whispers grew louder. At the market, someone asked if Jasmine was helping with more than just the altar. At the pharmacy, Mrs. Avery gave her a pointed look and said, "It's always best to remember your place, dear." The words stung, sharper than she expected. At home, Jasmine lay awake at night, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment she'd spent with Father Daniel. She questioned her intentions, her feelings, and the role she played in fanning the rumors. But no matter how she tried to convince herself otherwise, she couldn't ignore the truth. Something real had passed between them, something she couldn't explain, or deny, or hide. As Sunday approached again, Jasmine braced herself. She knew the whispers in the pew were only the beginning. In Willow Creek, secrets rarely stayed hidden, and this one was already slipping from her grasp. Confessions. As the rumors swirled and the days grew colder, Jasmine felt the pressure building inside her. What had once been a comforting routine, her walks to St. Mary's, her quiet moments in the sanctuary, now felt heavy with scrutiny. Even her prayers came tangled with doubt, as if the town's whispers had seeped into her soul. For days, Jasmine tried to distract herself. She busied her hands with chores, buried herself in work, and avoided eye contact when she passed familiar faces on Main Street. But nothing quieted the unrest in her heart. Each night, lying awake in her childhood bedroom, she replayed every interaction with Father Daniel, every word, every glance, every fleeting moment of connection. She wondered if she had imagined it all. She wondered if she had crossed a line, or if the line itself had always been an illusion. By Friday evening, Jasmine could no longer carry the burden alone. She made her way to St. Mary's just before dusk, hoping the empty church might offer her the peace she craved. The stained glass windows glowed with the last rays of sun, casting soft colors across the pews. The sanctuary was quiet, save for the distant sound of the wind in the eaves. She found Father Daniel in the confessional, the heavy curtain pulled aside, his silhouette framed by flickering candlelight. He looked up as she entered, his expression warm but weary. Jasmine hesitated, suddenly uncertain, but he nodded gently, inviting her to sit. "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned," Jasmine began, her voice trembling. "It's been a long time since my last confession." Father Daniel's voice was calm, steady. "Take your time, Jasmine. This is a safe space." For a moment she couldn't speak. The words tangled in her throat. But something in his tone, the kindness, the patience, gave her the courage to go on. "I'm struggling," she admitted, her hands twisting in her lap. "Not just with what people are saying, but with what I feel. I come here for peace, for guidance, but lately all I find is confusion. I'm not sure where faith ends and my own desires begin." The silence that followed was both comforting and terrifying. She could hear her own heart beating, loud in her ears. Father Daniel's reply was gentle. "It's natural to feel conflicted, especially when our hearts lead us somewhere unexpected. We are human before we are anything else, Jasmine." She swallowed, feeling tears sting her eyes. "I don't want to bring shame to the church or to you, but I can't pretend these feelings aren't real. I've tried. I don't know what to do." Father Daniel shifted, and for a moment Jasmine could sense the weight he carried too, the expectations, the vows, the unspoken rules. "There are moments," he said quietly, "when the line between the sacred and the personal isn't as clear as we wish it were. Our hearts are complicated. They don't always follow the path we expect." Jasmine looked up, searching his face for judgment, but found only understanding. "People will always talk," he continued. "They see what they want to see, but only you know what's in your heart. Only you can decide what's right, for your faith and for your future. She took a shaky breath. I just wish it was easier. Father Daniel smiled sadly. If it were easy, it wouldn't be faith or love. The confession ended not with absolution, but with a quiet, vulnerable understanding. For the first time, Jasmine realized that Father Daniel was as human as she was, struggling with his own boundaries, his own feelings, his own fear of what might happen next. The roles of priest and penitent, guide and seeker blurred until there was only two souls sharing the burden of an impossible choice. As Jasmine left the confessional, she felt lighter, but also more exposed. She had laid her soul bare, not just before God, but before the man at the center of her turmoil. She wondered if she had said too much, if she had crossed another unseen line, but in her heart, she knew she couldn't keep hiding. The truth was out now, and whatever happened next, she would face it with open eyes. Outside, the evening air was cool, the sky awash with the colors of twilight. Jasmine paused on the church steps, breathing deeply. The town might not forgive her. The whispers might never stop. But for the first time, she felt seen, not as a rumor, not as a cautionary tale, but as a woman standing on the edge of something unknown. And somewhere inside the church, Father Daniel remained, caught in the same uncertain space, questioning the lines that separated faith from love, duty from desire. The confessions of that night would linger long after the candles burned low, echoing through the empty sanctuary, waiting for answers only time could bring. After hours, the church always looked different at night. The bustle of Sunday mornings gave way to a hushed stillness, the stained glass dark and mysterious, shadows stretching long across the sanctuary floor. On this particular evening, Jasmine found herself wandering towards St. Mary's, long after most of Willow Creek had turned in for the night. She hadn't planned to go back. After her confession, Jasmine had tried to avoid the church, convinced that distance would quiet the storm inside her. But something pulled her there, a restlessness she couldn't shake, a need for the calm she could never find at home. The doors were supposed to be locked, but when Jasmine pressed her hand against the old wooden handle, it swung open with a soft groan. She stepped inside, blinking as her eyes adjusted to the dimness. Candles flickered on the altar, their light painting gold halos on the walls. The familiar scent of wax and old wood wrapped around her, grounding her in a place that felt both safe and dangerous. She thought she was alone until she heard the soft clatter of books in the back of the church. Startled, Jasmine turned to find Father Daniel kneeling near the bookshelf, stacking hymnals and prayer guides. He looked up, equally surprised. For a moment, they simply stared at one another, both caught off guard by the timing, by the vulnerability of being seen after hours. "Couldn't sleep?" Father Daniel asked gently, his voice barely more than a whisper in the echoing space. Jasmine shook her head. "You too?" He smiled, a tired smile that said more than words ever could. "I find the quiet helps me think, and sometimes it's easier to pray when no one is watching." Jasmine nodded, understanding more than she could say. She wandered toward him, letting the silence stretch comfortably between them. They worked together in the lamplight, stacking hymnals and tidying the pews. The simple task steadied Jasmine's hands, gave her an excuse to be there. With each small movement, the weight of the world seemed to ease, if only for a moment. When the last book was in place, Father Daniel sat down in the front pew, motioning for Jasmine to join him. She hesitated, then slid in beside him, her heart beating fast. For a while, neither spoke. The sanctuary seemed to hold its breath, waiting. "It's strange," Jasmine finally said, her voice low, "how different everything feels at night, like the church is holding secrets." Father Daniel nodded, gazing up at the altar. "At night, it's easier to be honest, with ourselves, with God. The masks we wear for other people fall away." Jasmine studied his profile, seeing the exhaustion in his eyes, the lines of worry around his mouth. She wondered what burdens he carried, how much of himself he hid behind sermons and smiles. "Do you ever wish things were different?" she asked quietly. He turned to her, surprised by the question, but he didn't shy away. All the time, he admitted. But wishing doesn't change reality. It only makes us aware of what we long for. Jasmine's breath caught. She wanted to ask him what he longed for, but the question felt too dangerous, too raw. Instead, she looked down at her hands, folded in her lap. "I'm sorry," she said after a moment. "I never wanted to cause trouble. If people are talking, if you're feeling pressured, it's because of me." Father Daniel reached out, his hand hovering just above hers. He didn't touch her, but the intention was clear. Comfort, not condemnation. "You haven't done anything wrong, Jasmine," he said softly. "We've both just been honest. Maybe too honest for a town like this." She smiled sadly. "Honesty feels risky here." He nodded. "But it's also the only way we find out what's real." The air between them changed, charged with something neither could name. Jasmine felt it in the space between their shoulders, the closeness of their voices, the way every word seemed to matter more in the darkness. "I keep telling myself to stop feeling this way," Jasmine admitted, the confession slipping out before she could stop it. "But I can't." Father Daniel closed his eyes for a moment, as if fighting some invisible battle. When he opened them, there was no judgment, only understanding. "Neither can I," he whispered. The words hung between them, fragile and dangerous. In the stillness of the church, with only the soft flicker of candlelight for company, Jasmine knew that nothing would ever be the same. The feelings they shared, unspoken but undeniable, had finally found their voice. When she finally left the church that night, Jasmine paused on the steps, the cool air washing over her. She felt both terrified and exhilarated, as if she had stepped out onto the edge of something vast and unknown. Inside, Father Daniel remained, sitting in the empty sanctuary, his head bowed, wrestling with the same longing that kept Jasmine awake. They were both caught in the quiet after hours, bound together by a secret neither could deny, a secret that would change both their lives, for better or worse. The breaking point. The days that followed their late-night conversation felt heavier, as if every moment was swollen with unspoken words. Jasmine tried to keep her life as normal as possible, work, family, routine, but nothing fit quite right anymore. The pull toward Father Daniel was undeniable now, like a tide she could no longer resist. Everywhere she went, she saw reminders of him. His sermons seemed to echo her private doubts and dreams. She heard his laughter in her mind, saw the warmth in his eyes when he spoke about forgiveness, about love, about fear. At home, her mother watched her with concern, sensing the change even if she didn't understand its cause. Jasmine's heart ached with longing and confusion. She prayed for clarity, for strength to do the right thing, but the answers felt as distant as the stars. What if her right thing wasn't what everyone expected? What if the longing in her chest was something sacred, not sinful? One evening, as rain battered the windows, Jasmine made a decision. She could not keep pretending, could not live with half-truths and borrowed courage. She would see Father Daniel not as a penitent seeking comfort, but as a woman seeking answers. With trembling hands, she wrote him a note. "Meet me in the chapel tonight, after Vespers. I need to speak with you. Jasmine." She left the note where he'd find it, then spent the day counting down the hours, her nerves twisted tight. By the time the last hymn faded and the congregation drifted home, Jasmine's heart was pounding so loudly she thought it might echo through the empty church. The chapel was dim and quiet, shadows pooling around the altar. Jasmine stood by the window, watching lightning flicker across the sky, her breath fogging the glass. When Father Daniel arrived, he paused in the doorway, uncertain. Their eyes met, and for a moment nothing else existed, only the storm outside and the storm within. "Jasmine," he said quietly, his voice thick with worry and something else. Hope, maybe, or fear. She stepped toward him, her words spilling out in a rush. "I can't do this anymore. I can't keep pretending nothing's changed. I feel like I'm living in two worlds, and neither of them is honest. I tried to fight it. I really did, but every time I see you, I know I'm lying to myself." Father Daniel closed the distance between them, his expression raw. "I know," he whispered. "I've been trying to find the right path, but I can't. Not when it means losing you, or losing myself." Lightning flashed, illuminating his face, so open, so conflicted. Jasmine reached for his hand, and this time he didn't pull away. The touch was electric, grounding her to the moment, to the risk, to the possibility. "I don't want to cause you pain," she said, voice breaking. "But I can't keep living like this, half in shadow, half in light. I need to know if there's any future for us, even if it means letting go of everything else." Father Daniel looked down at their joined hands, then up into her eyes. "There's nothing in the world I want more than to be with you. But the cost, it would be everything I've ever known. My vows, my place in this community, maybe even my faith." Tears slipped down Jasmine's cheeks. "And if we do nothing, we lose each other anyway." He nodded, swallowing hard. "Either way, there is loss." A long silence stretched between them, filled with the sound of rain on the chapel roof. Jasmine thought of the future she'd imagined for herself, the safe, quiet life she'd always accepted. Now all she wanted was this, the truth, the chance to love fully, without shame. "I choose you," she said suddenly, the words stronger than she felt. "Whatever happens, I choose you. I can't control what people say or what we have to leave behind. But I won't let fear make my decisions for me." Father Daniel let out a shaky breath, relief and fear mingling in his eyes. "Are you sure?" Jasmine nodded, a weight lifting from her shoulders. "Yes, I've never been more sure of anything in my life." He stepped closer, his forehead resting against hers, their breaths mingling in the quiet chapel. "Then whatever comes next, we face it together." They stood like that for a long moment, neither willing to let go. Outside, the storm began to ease, the thunder fading into a gentle rain. For the first time, Jasmine felt hope outweigh her fear. She knew the road ahead would be hard, filled with consequences, judgment, and loss. But as she clung to Father Daniel's hand, she realized that the only thing more dangerous than risking everything for love was living without it. In the quiet after the storm, they made a silent promise to choose each other, no matter the cost. The consequences. The morning after their decision, the world outside seemed unchanged. Grey clouds drifting above Willow Creek, dew on the grass, church bells ringing as usual. But for Jasmine, everything felt different. There was relief in finally choosing her own path, but beneath it pulsed an anxious, brittle fear. She and Father Daniel had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed, and all the quiet whispers in town would soon become a roar. The fallout began sooner than Jasmine expected. It started with Mrs. Avery, who arrived early to water the church garden and glimpsed Jasmine slipping out the side door as the first light broke. Later, as Jasmine walked through town, she felt eyes lingering, conversations pausing, then starting again in hurried whispers as she passed. At the diner, where she used to share laughter over coffee, even her closest friends exchanged wary glances. By the afternoon, the story had spread to every corner of Willow Creek. Each retelling made it more salacious. Jasmine had been seen meeting Father Daniel late at night, seen leaving the chapel at dawn, seen with her hand in his as they spoke in low, urgent voices. The facts blurred, exaggerated by each new mouth. No one knew the truth, but everyone was eager to believe the worst. That evening, Father Daniel stood before the parish council, a panel of elders, faces set in grim judgment. He admitted that his relationship with Jasmine had crossed the boundaries expected of him as a priest. He did not beg for forgiveness or make excuses. He spoke quietly, with the same honesty that had drawn Jasmine to him from the start. "I have failed to uphold your trust," he said, his voice steady, "but I have also tried to be true to myself and to what I believe love should be." His words fell into the silence like stones. The oldest council member, Mr. Peterson, shook his head. "You have betrayed your vows, and you have shamed this parish. We cannot ignore this." The verdict was swift. Father Daniel was suspended from his duties, pending further investigation by the diocese. He was asked to leave the church rectory immediately. Outside, a small crowd had gathered. Jasmine found herself the subject of cold stares and open accusations. People she'd known her whole life now looked at her with suspicion, anger, even disgust. Mrs. Taylor confronted her in the grocery store aisle, voice sharp with disappointment. "I trusted you, Jasmine. I trusted you to know your place." The words struck Jasmine harder than she expected. Shame, raw and burning, flared in her chest. She tried to speak, to defend herself, but the words stuck. What could she possibly say? The truth was complicated and messy, and no one wanted to hear it. At home, her mother was pale and shaken. "Jasmine, what have you done?" she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "People are saying terrible things. How could you let this happen?" Jasmine tried to explain about love, about choices, about how something that felt so right could cause so much pain. But her mother only wept, retreating behind the silence of disappointment. Father Daniel, too, felt the full force of the town's judgment. Old friends turned away from him. Parishioners who once praised his kindness now whispered about his hypocrisy. He wandered the church grounds, gathering his few belongings, the echo of angry voices trailing after him. But through the storm, Jasmine and Father Daniel found each other again. They met at the edge of the creek as dusk fell, the sky bruised purple and gold. Jasmine's eyes were red from crying, but her voice was steady. "I'm so sorry," she said. "This is my fault. If I'd just—" Father Daniel shook his head, reaching for her hand. "No, Jasmine, we both chose this. We knew what it might cost." They stood together in the gathering darkness, two exiles on the margins of the only home they'd ever known. The weight of the community's disapproval pressed down on them, but in that shared silence there was also strength, a stubborn, aching love that refused to be erased by shame. As the first stars appeared, Jasmine realized that they were not alone in their suffering. Others had loved in secret, had been cast out or condemned for following their hearts. Willow Creek had a long memory for scandal, but it was not the town's memory that mattered most. What mattered was the truth between her and Father Daniel, the truth they had fought for, even when the world turned against them. In the end, the cost of honesty was everything they had ever known. But as Jasmine clung to Father Daniel's hand, she knew she would pay it again, if it meant loving without regret. Chapter 8. A Crisis of Faith. The days that followed were slow and grey, each one blending into the next as Jasmine and Father Daniel tried to make sense of the wreckage left behind. For Jasmine, it was like watching her life unravel thread by thread. The world that had always seemed so familiar, her friends, her job, her family, now felt hostile and uncertain. She had once been welcomed everywhere she went, the coffee shop, the market, the park by the creek. Now she felt the hush that fell as she entered a room, the glances that slid away as she approached, the whispers that always seemed to start just as she passed. Friends who had once filled her evenings with laughter no longer returned her calls. At work, she was met with strained politeness. Her boss, Mrs. Green, pulled her aside to say, "Maybe it's best if you take some time off, until things settle down." At home, her mother's disappointment had hardened into a wall of silence. Jasmine tried to explain, to apologize, to bridge the distance, but her mother listened with tight lips and downcast eyes. The ache of that distance was worse than any gossip or glare. The house, once warm with conversation, now echoed with absence. Meanwhile, Father Daniel faced his own storm. He moved out of the rectory and took a small room above the hardware store, the same building where he bought coffee in the mornings. The town that had greeted him with open arms now eyed him with suspicion. Parishioners, who had once hugged him after Mass, now crossed the street to avoid him. He heard the anger in their voices, betrayal, shame, disgrace, and the words cut deeper because he understood them. But the sharpest wound was inside. For years, Father Daniel's faith had been his anchor. The church was his family, his purpose. Now he felt adrift, untethered from everything he'd known. He spent long hours sitting in the empty sanctuary, searching the shadows for answers. He prayed for forgiveness, for guidance, for a sign that he hadn't lost himself along the way. But the silence pressed back, thick and unyielding. Was his love for Jasmine a sin? Was it proof that he'd been unfit for his calling all along, or was it something different, a sign that God's plan was more complicated, more mysterious than rules and vows could explain? Jasmine wondered too. In her quiet moments, she replayed her whole life in Willow Creek, the years spent being a good daughter, the Sundays at church, the friendships she'd once thought unbreakable. She tried to imagine leaving, starting over in a place where no one knew her name or her secrets, but her roots ran deep. Even now, with so much lost, this place was a part of her. One afternoon, Jasmine wandered to the edge of the creek where she and Father Daniel had met after the scandal broke. She found him there, sitting on a rock, staring into the water. He looked older somehow, his shoulders slumped, his eyes shadowed. He glanced up as she approached, forcing a smile. "Hey, hey," she replied, sinking down beside him. They sat in silence for a while, watching the water ripple and catch the light. Finally, Father Daniel spoke, his voice hoarse. "I keep wondering if I made a mistake, not just with us, but with everything. My whole life I thought I understood what faith was. I thought it meant giving up what I wanted. But now, I don't know anymore." Jasmine reached for his hand, their fingers tangling. "You didn't make a mistake," she said, though doubt lingered in her own heart. "You followed your truth. Maybe that's what faith is, choosing to be honest, even when it costs you everything." He squeezed her hand, searching her face for answers. "And if I can't go back, if I'm not a priest anymore, who am I?" Jasmine's eyes stung with tears. "You're still you, the man who helped people, who listened, who cared. The man I—" She stopped, afraid to say the word aloud in daylight, but the meaning filled the silence between them. He nodded, gratitude and sorrow warring in his eyes. "And you? How are you holding up?" Jasmine looked away, watching a leaf drift past on the current. "I feel like I've lost everything. My friends, my family, my reputation. Sometimes I wonder if it was worth it." He took a deep breath, the air trembling in his lungs. "Would you do it again?" She thought about it, really thought. The loneliness, the pain, the freedom of no longer pretending. She turned to him, steady and sure. "Yes, I'd rather live with the truth, even if it hurts." A soft smile tugged at his lips. "Me too." As the sun dipped behind the trees, they found comfort in each other's presence, a small flame of hope in the gathering dusk. The road ahead was uncertain, their future no clearer than the murky creek at their feet. But in their shared crisis of faith, Jasmine and Father Daniel discovered something neither had expected. Sometimes, when everything else falls away, all that's left is love. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough to start again. The choice. Summer crept quietly into Willow Creek, the air heavy with the scent of wildflowers and the promise of change. But for Jasmine and Father Daniel, the turning of the season brought no relief from the questions that haunted them. Their world had become a place of in-betweens, between hope and regret, between what was lost and what might still be found. The fallout from their secret lingered like fog. Jasmine's friendships, once unbreakable, were now brittle and few. She heard whispers wherever she went, but she walked with her head high, her decision to stand by Father Daniel already shaping her into someone braver than she'd ever thought possible. And yet, the cost was undeniable. Her mother barely spoke to her, her job was gone, and she found herself wondering how long she could stay in the town she'd always called home. Father Daniel was lost in a different kind of exile. The church that had once given his life purpose was now closed to him. He attended meetings with church authorities, facing questions he could not answer. "Do you renounce her?" they asked. "Do you repent?" But every time he tried to picture a future without Jasmine, he saw only emptiness. One evening, as the sky blushed with sunset, Jasmine and Father Daniel met in the old cemetery behind St. Mary's, a place where secrets felt safe among the stones and silence. They sat together on a cool marble bench, hands tangled, shoulders pressed close. The quiet between them was both a comfort and a weight. "We can't keep living like this," Jasmine said softly, her voice barely louder than the summer breeze. "Caught in the middle, waiting for the world to forget." Father Daniel looked at her, his eyes tired but filled with love. I know, I keep hoping it will get easier, but every day feels heavier. I can't go back to who I was before, but I don't know how to move forward either. Jasmine's heart twisted. If we stay, the town will never let us forget, but if we leave, we lose everything we've ever known. He traced her knuckles with his thumb, his touch gentle, reassuring. Is there anywhere we could go, Jasmine? Anywhere we could start over, just us? She swallowed hard, thinking of distant cities, new beginnings, and the ache of leaving her mother, her memories, her roots. Maybe, she whispered, but I'm scared. What if it's just trading one kind of loneliness for another? Father Daniel drew a shaky breath. I'm scared too, but I can't ask you to sacrifice everything for me. If you want to stay, if you want to try to rebuild your life here, I'll understand. She shook her head, tears burning her eyes. This isn't just about me. I don't want a life built on hiding or on pretending this never happened, but I also don't want to be the reason you lose everything that mattered to you. They sat in silence, the choice hanging between them like a question mark that would not fade. Jasmine thought of the girl she used to be, the girl who wanted to make everyone proud, who believed in belonging. That girl was gone, replaced by someone who understood the price of honesty and the pain of love. Father Daniel turned to her, his expression raw and honest. What if we choose each other, Jasmine? Not because it's easy, not because it's safe, but because it's true. She let out a shaky laugh, hope and fear twisting together. And what if we fail? He squeezed her hand. Then we fail together. For a long moment they said nothing. Around them, the cemetery filled with the songs of crickets and the last rays of sunlight. Jasmine closed her eyes, searching her heart for the answer she already knew. I choose you, she said, her voice clear in the dusk. I choose this, whatever it is, wherever it leads. I can't promise it won't hurt, but I can promise I won't run away. Father Daniel's eyes glistened. Then let's go. Let's start over somewhere new. Let's give ourselves the chance to live honestly for once. They stood together, the gravity of the decision settling into their bones. As they walked hand in hand out of the cemetery, Jasmine felt the weight of her old life slipping away, replaced by a strange, thrilling freedom. There would be regrets, she knew. There would be days of doubt and nights of sorrow, but there would also be hope and the chance to write a new story together. At the edge of the cemetery, Jasmine glanced back at the town, the only home she'd ever known and the place she'd learned to fight for her own heart. For the first time, she wasn't afraid of the future. With Father Daniel at her side, she was ready to risk everything for love. The aftermath months had passed since Jasmine and Father Daniel left Willow Creek behind. The seasons had shifted, summer's heat giving way to the golden hush of autumn, then the quiet of winter. With time and distance, the pain of exile softened, replaced by something unexpected, a hard-earned sense of peace. They settled in a small city 2 states away, a place where nobody recognized their names or cared about their past. Jasmine found work in a cozy, independent bookstore, her days filled with the scent of paper and the gentle rhythm of new beginnings. Father Daniel, no longer a priest, but still a man of deep faith, found purpose volunteering at a local shelter, serving in ways that required no collar, only compassion. At first, their life together was fragile, each day a careful balancing act between hope and regret. Jasmine sometimes woke at night, tangled in dreams of home, her mother's kitchen, the sound of church bells, the riverbank where she'd grown up. But the ache grew gentler with each sunrise, replaced by gratitude for the second chance they'd given themselves. On quiet evenings, she and Daniel sat on their tiny apartment balcony, wrapped in blankets, sipping tea and talking about everything and nothing. The world felt smaller, but their love had grown larger, tempered by loss, resilient in ways they hadn't known it could be. Jasmine often reflected on the journey that had brought her here, the choices that had cost her so much, the faith she'd questioned, the forgiveness she was still learning to give. She missed some things fiercely, her mother's embrace, the familiar faces of Willow Creek, the hush of St. Mary's at dusk. But she had gained something far more precious, the the freedom to live honestly, and the courage to follow her heart, even when the path was uncertain. One rainy afternoon, a letter arrived from Willow Creek. Jasmine's hands trembled as she recognized her mother's careful handwriting. She hesitated before opening it, her heart pounding with memories and longing. Inside, the letter was brief but kind. "Dear Jasmine, I hope this finds you well. The house feels emptier without you, but I want you to know that I've been thinking about you every day. I may never fully understand the choices you made, but I hope you found happiness. Sometimes forgiveness comes quietly in ways we don't expect. I love you. Come visit when you're ready." Mom, tears welled in Jasmine's eyes. She realized in that moment that forgiveness was not a single act, but a slow unfolding, a willingness to let go of anger and sorrow, to make space for love in new forms. It was not only the town or her mother she needed to forgive, but herself. That night, she shared the letter with Daniel. He read it in silence, then folded it carefully and handed it back, his gaze warm and full of understanding. "I think she misses you," he said softly. "I miss her too," Jasmine replied, her voice breaking with relief and sorrow. Daniel squeezed her hand. "Maybe one day you can go back. Maybe not as the same person, but as someone stronger." Jasmine nodded, her heart lighter. "Maybe we both can." They sat in silence, the city lights twinkling around them. Jasmine knew the road ahead would still be difficult. There would always be whispers in small towns, doubts in quiet moments, memories that surfaced unexpectedly. But she also knew that she had survived the storm, and that love, real love, had been worth every loss. Looking back, she saw the girl she used to be, cautious, eager to please, afraid to risk anything. Now, she saw a woman who had faced judgment, chosen her own path, and learned to forgive, not just others, but herself. Faith, she realized, was never about certainty or easy answers. It was about living with open hands, willing to lose, willing to start again. It was about loving without guarantees, forgiving without conditions, and trusting that some things, truth, courage, love, are worth the cost. As autumn faded to winter, Jasmine and Daniel stepped into a new chapter together. There were still difficult days, but also laughter, quiet mornings, and hope that stretched far beyond the skyline. In the aftermath of heartbreak, they had discovered a deeper faith, not in institutions, but in themselves and in each other. Epilogue. Years passed, and the story of Jasmine and Daniel became something more than just a memory of scandal or heartbreak. In the quiet corners of their new life, they built something lasting, an ordinary, extraordinary love. They made new friends who knew them for who they were, not for what they'd done. They found a small circle of trust, forgiveness, and laughter. And slowly, the pain of what they'd lost faded, replaced by gratitude for what they'd found. Jasmine eventually returned to Willow Creek, not to stay, but to visit. She met her mother on the porch of the old family home, the same porch where she'd watched countless sunrises as a girl. They spoke honestly, sometimes through tears, sometimes through laughter. And though the past couldn't be undone, forgiveness at last had room to bloom. Daniel too found his way, shaping a new kind of faith that was both humble and real. He helped where he could, listened deeply, and loved Jasmine with a gentle steadiness that never faded. They learned that healing is rarely simple, and that happiness isn't about avoiding pain, but learning to let love grow even from the hardest places. And so, their story is not just about forbidden love or small-town judgment. It's about the risks we take for the people and dreams that matter most. About the courage to break free from the expectations of others, to be honest about our hearts, and to forgive even when it seems impossible. Because in the end, the truest stories are not about the storms we survive, but about how we find the light again, together. Now, dear listener, I want to hear from you. Have you ever taken a risk for love or found forgiveness in an unexpected place? Let us know in the comments below, and as always, tell us where you're listening from. Until next time, may your own story be filled with courage, love, and a little bit of hope.